if you're switching jobs or if you get laid off, there's a good chance that in that year you might have a lower tax bracket because you're not working a full year of employment. And really what happens is it's any time where you have that shock in income. You get married, you switch jobs, you stop working for a while. Anytime you have something that drastically affects your income, that's when it's a good time to look at potentially doing a Roth conversion and paying way less in taxes. Hey, welcome back everyone to the podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the 5 things to watch out for anytime you go to switch your job, whether that's you go to switch employers or you go from W-2 to 1099, or you're just taking some time off. Like, what are the things that you have to watch out for? Not just from a tax perspective, but also from a tax, from an insurance, from a holistic wealth building perspective. What are some of the things that you have to watch out for anytime you go to switch over your job? Now, these isn't going to be everything that you have to watch out for, but this should give you a good starting point of things to kind of cross off your box. So the first thing that you want to do is check on COBRA insurance. So COBRA typically is a sponsored health insurance plan. Whenever you leave employers, they should be offering you COBRA, which allows you to keep your health insurance, I believe, up until 6 months after you leave your current company. Even if you don't get signed on to a new company, you have COBRA to make sure that you have health insurance. So that way, if something were to happen to you during that time where you're not at a new company, you'll be taken care of. So you want to check about COBRA and health insurance benefits to make sure that you're covered sort of in that lull time when you make the transition from jobs, or you go from W-2 to 1099 or whatever it may have you. The second biggest thing is decide what to do with any previous 401k monies. Okay, so you worked at a company for a while, you were contributing money to the company 401k, perhaps they were matching it. Hopefully you stayed there long enough to hit the vesting period. So most companies have hey, you need to stay with them for at least a year or two in order for the 401k to vest. So you get your contribution, obviously, plus whatever they match on that. But whether or not you want to, and you have a couple of options, okay? When you leave a company, assuming, let's say you're going to work for another company, you're typically going to have one or two options. Number one, you could either roll the old 401k over to what's called a rollover IRA with a investment fund of your choice, a Vanguard, a Charles Schwab, TD Ameritrade, whatever it is. You can roll the old one over to one of your choice, or you can roll your old 401k into your new 401k plan. Now, let me give you some pros and cons and some things to watch out for. One of the things that I always say is you should always get the employer match, right? You should always get the employer match because it's free money. But when we're rolling funds over, they're not going to match on any sort of things that you roll over, okay? It's going to be always cheapest to invest your own money on your own than it is to have a 401k or some sort of sponsored plan. So for example, if I have $100,000 in a 401k and I decide to roll it over into an IRA versus take that $100,000 and put it into the new company 401k, I'm going to pay less in fees to have the rollover IRA than I am put it in the 401k. But here's a couple of kickers. So one thing with IRAs, remember, is that you can never loan against an IRA. Okay, you never can borrow against an IRA, versus you might be working at a new company that actually lets you borrow against the 401k. So if you go from your old 401k to an IRA, you can't then go and put that into a 401k and then borrow against it. Once it's in an IRA, it's pretty much dead. It's dead from there. It's a rollover IRA, and now you can't borrow against it. So you might save money in fees by having it in an IRA, but it's pretty much dead at that point, right? Versus a 401k, you roll it over into your new company's 401k, you're going to have to play by their rules, right? So they might determine what you can or can't invest in. I know anybody here that works for like consulting firms or tech, you probably can't invest in your competitors' funds. You probably can't, if you're an auditor, you're a CPA, or you work in public finance, you're not able to invest in a lot of companies. You're only allowed to invest in the companies that your company allows you to choose. But just remember that I would always say that it's normally cheapest to invest your money yourself rather than through a 401k plan, because there's going to be added fees to that. And then the other thing that I would want you to make sure of is what are your current company's rules whenever you leave the job? Okay, so most companies, they'll automatically just convert your 401k over to an IRA if there's dormant activity. Like if you've just let it sit there for half a year and you haven't done anything with it, they might just roll that over to an IRA. So if you wanted to put it in the new company's 401k, make sure that's something that you take a look at, so that way you're able to do that so they don't make the decision for you. Okay. So I guess we can summarize that part of it by saying, hey, if you just want the cheapest way to invest your money, roll it over to an IRA. If you want the ability to maybe borrow against the 401k at one point in time, well, then you got to roll it into your company's new company 401k plan. But again, check that new plan to see if they even let you borrow against it. Some companies don't let you do anything with your 401k money while you're at the company. They don't let you borrow against it. They don't let you distribute it. I had one client one time where she wanted to take a couple 20, 30 grand out of her 401k, and her company said they either do the entire thing distributed or they do nothing, which I found was really weird. But that when you investing your money with your company, you're playing on their playing field, right? Their ball game and their rules. The third thing that we're going to talk about is determine if it makes sense to do a Roth conversion. Okay. A Roth conversion, and you should go check out some of the older podcasts that I have, a couple good ones on Roth IRAs, Roth conversions, when to do a Roth conversion, et cetera. So I don't want to drill that down too much, but check and see if a Roth conversion makes sense. And here's why. If you're switching jobs, or if you get laid off or something happens to you, there's a good chance that in that year you might have a lower tax bracket than what you normally do. So let's say you're working for the first 5 or 6 months and then you're not working for the remainder of the year, you're taking some time off. Well, it's likely that your tax rate that year is actually lower than what it normally is. So it might make sense for you to do a Roth conversion that year because your tax rate is just lower than what it used to because you're not working a full year of employment, right? So go check out some of those old podcasts and see if the Roth conversion might make sense to you. And really what happens is it's any time where you have that shock in income that I talk about, right? You get married, you switch jobs, you stop working for a while. Anytime you have something that drastically affects your income, that's when it's a good time to look at potentially doing a Roth conversion and paying way less in taxes over time. The fourth point would be to do a tax projection of year end, okay? So what happens is if you're in like tech or you're in sales or any sort of high earning, doctor, high earning position, what happens is a lot of times those people end up owing money at the end of the year because they've been compensated through stock or bonuses stock or bonuses. And so what they should be doing is doing a tax projection of what they've already made this year compared to what they've already paid in taxes. And that's where they'll know, hey, should I be paying more money into the government? Should I be paying less money in? Like, what do I have to pay in to make sure that come tax time, I'm not faced with this huge tax burden, right? So you want to do a tax projection, just kind of project out what your taxes are owed anytime you're switching jobs or companies. The other thing that I want to throw in here is Social Security tax. Okay, so when you're a W-2, you pay Social Security tax on up to about $170,000 ish of W-2 wages. And once you hit that 170,000, you no longer pay into Social Security. You get capped out. You're at your Social Security max. But here's the problem. If you switch over to a new job, the new job may not know that you've already paid into the max for that year. So it is your job to tell them or to let them know that you're exempt from Social Security tax because you've already paid in to Social Security, right? Now, at the end of the day, it may not be the biggest deal not to do this, but I've seen it where people have paid in an extra $10,000, $15,000 in Social Security tax that they end up just getting back when they file their tax return. Okay, so you definitely don't want that to be you. You want to keep your money now rather than later. You don't want to get it back come tax time. So make sure you do that tax projection at year end to kind of see where your income is. Do that tax projection before you get to the new job. So then that way you know how to change your withholdings one way or the other. If I'm paid in a lot, well, maybe I let off the gas. If I'm not paid in enough, then maybe I start paying more money into taxes, right? And check that Social Security too. It's a big one. The last thing I would talk about, and this is something that you want to do before you leave the job, is this whole current benefits versus future benefit analysis. Okay. So I just want to lead this off by saying I've had a ton of people ask, hey, how does it make sense from going W-2 to 1099? What are some of the things that I have to think about? And Although it is true that if you go 1099 instead of W-2, there's a lot more stuff that you can write off on your taxes that you otherwise previously wouldn't have been able to write off. But just remember that going 1099, it really makes a dent in your ability to borrow money. When you're 1099, a typical lender is going to want to see 2 years of tax returns with that money filed of that income. Sorry, not money, but income. They're going to want to see that steady income. W-2 employees have it easy for the most part. The lender just wants to see a tax return and their W-2, a pay stub maybe. But when you're self-employed, it makes lending, it makes getting loans, especially if you're trying to invest in real estate like most of us are, it makes getting loans really hard. So you have to factor in like, what is that percentage that I need to make as a 1099 as opposed to a W-2? And typically, I want to say it comes out to be about 25 to 30% more. If you're 1099, that means that you're on the hook for your half of the self-employment tax. So you're on the hook for almost 8% in taxes on your wages. You're not paying into unemployment insurance. You're not getting workers' comp. You don't have any 401k benefits. You don't have any health insurance. I think I already said that. You're not getting any sort of 401k or any sort of matching or things like that. So there's a lot of perks or a lot of things that you lose being a 1099 that you would have had if you were W-2. And so that's what I want to say. Anybody that's thinking about looking to make the switch, you really have to see what you're giving up by making the switch. Because yeah, you might make 30 or 40, 50 grand more by being a 1099 than a W-2. But the fact of the matter is when you factor in health insurance, 401k benefits, workers' comp, unemployment insurance, company benefits, PTO, you don't get any PTO if you're self-employed, I'll tell you that. At least you don't have to ask anybody for a day off, but there is no PTO, right? So these are all sort of factors that you need to be thinking about anytime you're going to quit your job or when you're thinking about quitting your job. So I hope I was able to explain these really well to you. I know it was a short podcast. If you had any other suggestions or any other things that you would think about before switching a job, go ahead and drop those in the Facebook group, Tax Strategies for Real Estate Investors. And if you enjoy the podcast and you've been a loyal follower and you want to figure out how to work with us, 2 companies that you can work with. retaxprep.com if you're just looking to get your tax return filed by a competent real estate tax professional, as well as a community for learning. And then I also have taxstrategy365.com. I'll put these both in the show notes. Taxstrategy365.com is if you're looking to work one-on-one with a tax advisor who's also a real estate investor, because we know and we understand the struggles that you guys have to go through in order to get your next investment property. So thanks for tuning in to today's episode, and we'll see you guys next week on the podcast.